We the Gamers.
.com. Yeah, I'm from Destructoid. There's a box around my head.
Alright, well, I guess the big question would be Black Ops 2. There's a lot of rumors going around. One of the questions was, is with first Black Ops, there was kind of a semi-open-ended ending with Mason and how he was burnt from CIA and how they were finding him, but the whereabouts were still unknown. And is that something that will be explained in Black Ops 2? Is there Black Ops 2?
There has been just the announcement of a Call of Duty game coming out in 2012, so in true classified fashion, I can neither confirm nor deny. I've seen the same rumors. Personally, I think it would be a good idea to build on what they had done, but I can't comment because they have not given me any clearance to comment one way or the other. It's like, well, if it's not true, can I deny it? No. Well, if it's true, can I confirm it? No. I'm like, wow, you really are going to make me do this. So, yeah, the open-ended ending is still open-ended until we hear something else. I think we'll hear something soon.
Okay.
You know, but yeah, right now I'm not at liberty to discuss.
Fair enough.
I hate giving that answer, but it's true.
Totally understandable. Well, I guess probably get the same response, but just in case, there was a leaked, quote-unquote leaked, they can't see it on the video, but quote-unquote leaked video, or of a
list?
Start menu, of a start menu with, and zombie campaign was one of the options. Now, is that based off of truth, or is zombies going to be in
whatever the next game is?
Yes.
So now we're extrapolating several steps. Again, I can't say, but I actually don't really know anyway.
Okay.
It's kind of like half I have to be evasive and half I'm just stupid. I'm not always in the loop that people think I am in.
Right.
I mean, it's nice to be at Activision and be there so I can ask questions, but just because I ask questions does not mean they give me the answers.
Right.
And there are a lot of things, particularly on the Call of Duty side, that are like need to know because they're trying to avoid leaks.
Right.
I've seen some stuff online that I was like, wow, fans sure are creative. And you know, some of it may wind up to be close to the truth, some of it may be stone cold truth, some of it, I can guarantee you, is absolute fiction.
Right.
So I think the Treyarch is pretty proud of zombies, and I'd be surprised if they don't want to return to zombies because it is so popular.
Right.
But yeah, I haven't heard anything official that I can talk about, and I haven't even heard much unofficial that I can talk about, which is even more embarrassing.
I can't even think about it because I don't know.
Yeah. I've thought enough. Let's move on.
Well, with E3, and this was a question from our owner Josh. He asked, E3, basically the budget of E3 started off like just really high, and it seemed that throughout the years, E3 kind of lowered the budget. And do you think that that's going to play a role into what we can expect this year at E3, just in general from
everybody?
Yeah, or especially from Activision.
From Activision, well, I mean, E3 is the big dance for all the publishers, and you know, back in the 90s when it started, it was a question of who could be the loudest. Like every booth, I used to walk around with a sound meter at E3 and test for decibel ratings and stuff. EA always won. They were just absolutely the loudest booth. You got in the middle of the EA booth, couldn't hear yourself think, and it was like 113 decibels, 114 decibels. It was like rock concert quality stuff.
Wow.
And then concert. Yeah, sort of E3 sort of went down, and then everybody said, oh, E3 is dead. And there was one year when it was kind of small and nice, and everybody said, oh yeah, this is such an embarrassment. I got more done that year than any other year.
Right. What year was that?
That was like 3 years ago when it came back to the LA Convention Center.
Okay.
And people were like, oh no, it's not big enough, I can't fill the room. And it was better than the Santa Monica year where it was split up into like 16 different hotels. So this year I haven't heard what they're going to do, but Activision will have a booth as far as I know. Because Activision isn't actually a member of the ESA, and you have to be a member of the ESA generally to have a booth, or you're given priority. So because we're not part of the ESA, we haven't always had a booth. That was why there was a giant concert at Staples. It was kind of like, well, if we don't have space in there, let's go next door and have the world's loudest party. So I think we'll probably have another loud booth. That's all they've told me. They're like, oh yeah, it's going to be loud this year. And I'm like, well, that's the return of old E3 to me. So, but I think that, you know, the focus is going to be very much on a handful of games because that's what Activision has done. They've just scaled everything down.
Right.
So Call of Duty is going to be there, Skylanders is going to be there, and I'm not sure which of the other titles, you know, Prototype will have shipped by that point.
what can we expect at E3 from Activision? Do you know, as far as Call of Duty or any other titles?
They'll probably be talking about Call of Duty. I'm not sure whether they're going to do Tony Hawk, and I know that Skylanders Giants, like they went big with Skylanders last year, so I'm sure the Giants will have another big presence because they really want to get behind that and say, look, you know, we have a fresh IP from just last year and a big hit. But I think I don't know whether we're going to see Transformers or whether it's Tony Hawk or what else they have. I don't think we're going to see any big surprises.
Okay.
But I think it's definitely going to be Call of Duty and Skylanders, and then probably you know, like videos for a couple other things. And I'm not sure whether Transformers is going to be there playable or a theater or what.
Okay.
And Elite may have its own presence too. Again, I don't really know what the plan is yet. I haven't seen it.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning Elite. That was the next
perfect segue.
Exactly. You're good at this, Dan. So there have been a lot of mixed opinions about Elite and its tie-in with, maybe not so much leaks, probably more on the negative side, unfortunately. But
it's all right.
Do you? A lot of comments, especially on our site, is whether one of the big threads was, did Call of Duty Elite ruin Call of Duty? And a lot of people said, well, it doesn't affect your gameplay, so it can't ruin it.
That sounds fair to me.
But one of the main arguments was that it does kind of affect the downloadable content, whereas Black Ops, you know, everybody knew this is when our previous titles, not just Black Ops obviously, but from previous titles, you know, this is when the DLC is going to be, this is the map pack, like everybody gets it at the same time. And do you think that might have, because Elite, the founder status allowed you to get it earlier,
right,
and then everybody else had to wait, do you think that plays into it? It's
funny because a lot of people have said, you know, that Elite, well, it fragments the community. Now we have haves and have-nots. I'm like, well, to a certain extent, DLC has always been haves and have-nots. Either you want it or you don't. You can play with those people. Now it's just a hell of a lot messier.
Right.
That's the biggest problem, is that, you know, there's enough people, there's something like 1.5 million people that subscribed to the Call of Duty Elite service, and I think overall it's around 5 or 6 million people that are using just the free service, you know, just for stat tracking and stuff. So you've got 1.5 million on 2 consoles, so that's a pretty good player base of people that have those maps, but still people were saying, I can't find people that play these new maps, or, you know, the rotation isn't very satisfying, and that's going to get better as we get further on in the year, because there's going to be more and more content, and those, you know, you're going to have more options. I think that it is a drawback to how Elite is now. I mean, it's certainly messy for me to try to message, okay, 360 folks, you're getting this week. Next week, PS3 folks, you're getting this. Then everybody, whether you're Elite or not, you know, there's so much education that I have to do every week to try to say, you know, figure out who you are in the audience. And I would love to see the next generation of Elite, or the next revision of Elite, or Evolution, or whatever they're going to do, just simplify everything. But I mean, at the same time, you want to give people that feeling that they're an insider, and you want to give them the opportunity to be like, I got it first. I got it first. I got it before anybody else on my system. So, yeah, I agree that it's kind of like, it's a benefit in some ways, but it's a major pain in the ass in a lot of others. I don't know whether they're necessarily going to change it for next year, though. I don't know what the better idea would be, you know, because you want to create a benefit above and beyond, like you said, it doesn't really affect core gameplay. It's not like we have, okay, there's a super overpowered weapon and only Elite people, that would be a disaster. But for something that's just really the availability of a timing window, which, to be fair, in some cases is like 6 to 8 weeks, just, you know, from the first content drop on a platform all the way through to the collection. Now that's significant, but the idea was clearly supposed to be like, hey man, why aren't you joining Elite with me? It's also $10 cheaper over the course of the year. Why don't you just get it as soon as it's available? So I agree and acknowledge that that's awkward, but I also think that it is kind of not a bad business call, but I don't really know the best way around it from the gamer side. I guess it's kind of just a trial by fire. Yeah, I mean, that's the nice thing, is Elite is not like a boxed game. It's going to evolve. You know, you're going to see major changes probably on the same yearly cycle, but they can adjust, they can tweak. That, you know, if they committed to a release schedule for the year, they're going to stick to that release schedule. But next year, maybe they can change it, and, you know, based on that kind of feedback. The important thing is to give the team feedback that isn't screaming, ranting, and raving, because they do want the feedback. But, you know, you can say, hey, this doesn't work for me. What about this? Or can you come up with a different idea? That's great to give to the team. Trying to get 402 as a douchebag isn't the best. Isn't the best feedback. That doesn't help. Well, and I think the other
was that, you know, with the tie-in with zombies, with Treyarch and how important that is, that DLC is kind of on, and no offense to Infinity Ward or Sledgehammer, but, you know, Spec Ops did try to, I think, grab onto that kind of, or that special niche.
A second kind of co-op multiplayer gameplay that isn't competitive multiplayer.
Right, exactly. But just, I think the zombie fan base is just so much more widespread because it's been out so much longer.
Right, yeah.
That the distribution of DLC, I feel like it could either potentially help with Elite, or it could also be just a complete crapshoot. And I just wanted to see what your kind of thoughts are with, if maybe Treyarch might take a different route with integrating Elite.
I thought I think that they I'm sure that whatever's going on, they have a say in, hey, we'd like Elite to support this for our ideas and stuff like that. I thought that last year was pretty good in that I'm not a big zombies player. I'd like to be,
right?
But you know, they would put out in the bundles 4 maps and a zombies map, 4 maps and a zombies.
Right.
So there was always something new for that zombies audience, even though they realized it was a vocal and dedicated niche, but there weren't as many people playing zombies as there were standard multiplayer. If they wind up doing the same thing, where every once in a while there's a new zombies map, then that audience is going to be, even if it's on an Elite staggered schedule or something like that, that audience is still going to be happy.
Right.
So, you know, it's almost like it would be silly to do 5 zombie maps at the beginning of the Elite season, you know. So as long as they mix it up, it may not be as you know, Spec Ops audience may not be as rabid about like, oh boy, we've got a new mission. But zombies people will be like, hey, there's a new zombies map coming out this week. You know, we're going to do that. Let's shift. So I think that Elite can still support that kind of thing in a way that Spec Ops might be like, yeah, dude, let's try it. You know, people might not be as crazy for it, but I think that Elite could support zombies very similarly how it did last year, even with splitting up the content a little bit.
And then on to COD XP 2012. They were wondering if there was going to be a zombie pro tournament, because a lot of people, as you know, We The Gamers is huge on zombies. That's kind of how we got started, because we wanted to start a pro zombies tournament. Do you think that might be a possibility, or maybe that's a good suggestion?
I think it's a great suggestion. I think it's a good idea, and once again, we have to find out whether we're actually going to do XP. Last year, XP was very much an experiment. They're like, what if we threw a giant party for the community and asked everybody to pay to get into the party? And by the way, I hope you're in or available to come to Los Angeles to pull it off. So I still haven't heard, because I thought it was a no-brainer. After the first year, I was like, wow, that was really fun. They're like, yeah, it was fun. It was also expensive, and we learned a lot. And I'm like, okay, like too expensive? They're like, we'll see. So the last couple of months, I know people have been looking at the data internally and going, do we want to do this again? If we want to do it again, what should we change? Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? So again, I think that one of the biggest problems with XP is they confirmed it too late last year, so a lot of people had already made their summer plans or just didn't have the budget to get there, didn't have the time to get there. If they're going to do it this year, I hope that they start talking about it soon so that people can actually plan for it. And then that's the kind of thing where if they can confirm and say, yes, we're doing it, then, you know, like, first they have to get the venue and get all that stuff down, then they can start getting into the nitty-gritty of, okay, what are the panels going to be, and what are the tournaments going to be? And especially if Zombies does return in whatever this year's game is, it would make more sense to put a little bit more focus on that. I mean, Zombies was there last year, but purely in like a free play, like let's just hang out. But yeah, I think that would be a great idea, and I think it's very doable, but that's like, you know, what kind of tires do we put on the, oh wait, are we building a car? You know, so it's,
fair enough.
It's, yeah, one foot in front of the other.
I guess moving on to, focusing more on you.
Oh, I'm very comfortable talking about myself. I can confirm a lot more things about myself than I can Call of Duty right now.
What was your inspiration to write your book? Was it based off of a lot of people asking, you know, Dan, how do I do this? Yeah,
basically. I was the guy who reviewed all the letters that came in. To when I worked at GamePro, I was there for 7 years. I was at OXM for 3 years, and I loved doing the letter column, and I loved being in the forums and talking to people, and a lot of times I would write directly back to people who had written into the magazines. And that was always the #1 question. How do I get your job? I want your job. How do I get your job? And it was you know, kind of cute and a little sad, you know, on GamePro, because we were getting from a lot of like 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds who were like, I'm great at video games. I want to do that for a living. And it's like, oh, it's so not that. And they would ask because they were really earnest about it. And you know, their parents are like, you're gonna have to think about what you want to do for a job someday. And they're like, well, I love reading GamePro and I like playing games, so I want to be a GamePro guy. You know, that's a great job for me. You know, like I could be an astronaut or a fireman or a game reviewer. You know, and yeah, sure, why not? So I just sort of started hoarding those letters and taking note of that. And then it just never stopped. Even when I went to other publications, it was always there. And, you know, OXM was a little bit older audience, but then I was getting like 17-year-olds who were saying, my mom and dad say I have to go to college for something. You know, what do I do? Can I go to college for games? And I suck at math. Okay, well then you can't make games, you know? And that's why I got into it, because if you can't make games and you want to write about games, then, you know, it's down to skills. So it totally came out of that. And when somebody writes you an email and says, how do I get your job? How do I get a job as a game reviewer? The answer is so long and so detailed. That
it's an entire book.
Yeah, and I just realized, like, you don't want to ignore that person, but you can't explain it in just a simple reply. And you could say, like, you know, learn to write, you know, but that doesn't really help anybody. Or like, well, you just got to call around until you get a job. That doesn't help anybody. So when I left GamePro, I kind of shifted gears and I did some more behind-the-scenes stuff, and I really missed talking about reviewing games and you know, sort of everything that I had learned at that point. So that's when I started it back in 2003, and as I switched around jobs and went to different places, I just kept adding to it and revising it, and it wound up 78,000 words later, and now I've got like a 300-page book that really does try to go through everything from what you think the job is, but it isn't really, on through how do you polish your writing, exactly what makes a good writer, what kind of writing skills are they looking for, then into the nitty-gritty of how do I approach an editor and say I'm good enough to pay, you know, to be paid for all the stuff, and then on through. So yeah, it definitely came out of just people saying, how do I get your job? And the nicest feedback I've gotten from people in the industry, like other editors and stuff, is like, oh, thank God, I no longer have to write that email.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I don't have to do a cut and paste thing. Just go buy Dan's book. I'm like, yeah, just go buy Dan's book. That's what
exactly
I want you to do.
I mean, and not to blow smoke up your ass, but like I told you before.
No, feel free. Do that. It's okay.
Blow away. Like I said before, you know, just as an editor of a website, I think a lot of people don't realize, like, oh, I don't have to know how to spell, use the proper your, they're there, and it's heartbreaking because, you know, as a game enthusiast and as a writer myself, I don't want to read an article of someone who can't spell properly, because if you can't even take the time to learn how to spell correctly, then are you really going to take the time to write a review that is good and decent, or an article feature, what have you? So as a accumulated thank you from the entire industry, thank you for that.
Spelling is important. The building blocks really are core. You know, there's been a couple panels here at PAX where people have said, you know, what do I need to do to get your attention? And several people have said, if your resume has misspellings on it, if your writing samples have misspellings on it, we don't read any further. Like, you didn't care enough about the details to put your own best foot forward. I'm not letting you speak on behalf of my outlet to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And it's just, that stuff really matters. And some people are like, but you know what I mean. It's like, well, yeah, in a forum, that kind of goes through. But if you build best practices, people used to laugh at me because I would write out full things in chat forums in complete sentences with proper punctuation. And they were like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, because I'm setting an example. Even though I'm here as a cartoon character at GamePro, I need people to know that, like, language matters. You know, this is our basic communication thing.
Practice how you play, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's absolutely true. So yeah, I try to cover some of that in the book, and you know, if only someone off camera could hand me a copy of the book so I could show people what the book. I didn't want to leave. Thank you. So this is the book for anybody that's looking for the book. You can get it on Kindle, you can get it on iBook, you can get it digital for $10, you can get it dead tree for $18, and I'm self-publishing it, so I'm basically doing it out of the... Where can you find this? Oh, you can find this at criticalpathbook.com, but you can also just go to Amazon, which is where I do all my book shopping. If you're just that kind of person, you can get it there. And Cliff Basinski wrote the foreword. I was very, very, very honored to have that happen. So.
Yes, and for those of you who are watching this, go buy it.
I believe I have the We the Gamers endorsement on this one.
1,000%.
I'm really grateful for that.
And then going back to this is more of a personal question from as a huge Tony. I mean, growing up, Tony Hawk was the game. That's what I grew up on, playing on Nintendo 64, and just all the way up to Xbox. And then towards the end, it just kind of hit the spiral. And I did notice comparisons to Tony Hawk and Call of Duty, where Tony Hawk started to become the yearly title. Call of Duty, not as many titles per se as Tony Hawk, but it's,
not yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, pretty close. Versus EA bringing out Skate 3, which kind of became which have basically got the torch passed to them
Right.
as far as skating games go, and now with Battlefield 3. Is that something that Activision is kind of, is that a trend that they've noticed as well, or is it just kind of like,
It's kind of fun. I think it's all perspective, because when, you know, I know that Activision gets a lot of criticism for annualizing the franchises. This is purely a business thing. Like, if people want it, you bring it out the next year. Sometimes I say it's like a sitcom. You know, like if Big Bang Theory was like, we're taking a year off. Like when Lost was on that staggered schedule, it was only coming out every like 18 months. People are like, I want my Lost! You know, like if they could have done it every 12, they would have. But at the same time, Madden has come out every year. Need for Speed has come out every year. I think this year there's 2 Need for Speed titles within the category. At Mario sometimes comes out every year. Something, you know, on some platform. So, yeah, I mean, you always do run the risk of franchise fatigue anywhere, but it's really not unique to Activision. And there are some people that are just like, I don't want to do Need for Speed this year, and they don't. You know, they don't feel compelled to play the game that they don't want to play. So if Call of Duty is doing, you know, 1 game a year, Guitar Hero obviously is the worst example, right? This is how you kill something. Yeah, you shoot yourself in the head.
Another good segue.
Yeah, and I agree. Like as a Guitar Hero fan, I was like, this is the greatest thing. Guitar Hero 1 came out, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Guitar Hero 2, I felt a little bit better. I was like, this is awesome, and it came to 360, and that was what I was playing anyway. And then, you know, what was it? I think I counted it up. It was like 7 titles in 1 year when you counted the handhelds and stuff. There were 4 on the core platform. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, how can I miss you if you don't go away? And that's kind of the thing with an annual franchise. You need to be away just enough that we miss you. And Tony didn't, I mean, there were innovations within each Tony Hawk title, but not enough to really sustain people's interest. So that is absolutely a fear, you know, franchise fatigue is the phrase that I hear people talk about with Call of Duty. So it falls to the developers and it falls to the publisher to be responsible, to not shove it down people's throats. But at the same time, you know, the last 3 Call of Duty games, you've seen those record-setting numbers of, oh my god, we've made more money every year and we haven't raised the price significantly, you know. So right now seems like a poor time to stop, you know, because people are still in. Everything has a natural cycle. There will be a day when Call of Duty is not the bee's knees, and people will go, remember when Call of Duty defined the world? You know, the same way that we think about Tony Hawk. Like, oh my god, when 3 and 4 were out, all other games were second or lower. You know, there was nothing, you know. So, yeah, it's absolutely a risk, and, you know, I think that more than anybody, for all the complaining that the community does, if you think you were sick and tired of Guitar Hero and you were sad about that, think about the company that took a bath on all the games that didn't sell. I mean, like, nobody learned the lesson of Guitar Hero more than Activision, because they're like, and I've actually asked, I asked Bobby Kotick himself. I got to sit down with the man who is, just by the way, does not have snakes for hair, is not, you know, eating children during the interview, he's not the monster that the internet thinks he is. And I said, what was the plan with Guitar Hero there towards the last year? And he goes, well, it was a bad plan. We thought it was a good plan going into it, and in fact, you know, I was advised that it was a good plan, but I wasn't really thrilled with that one. But I listened to my team because we thought we were on the right track. He goes, yeah, I would say it wasn't a particularly good plan, and we regret it. So I was like, all right, so you know, like, you were living in the same world I was. He goes, yeah. So, you know, I think that more than anything, Activision is aware of what can happen when you don't treat a franchise with respect. But at the same time, I think there is gamers are like, 2 years or nothing. Like, has to be 2 years in between, and I don't believe that's true. I believe the development team needs 2 years to stay fresh and stay focused, and that's why, you know, they're interleaving 2 different developers on Call of Duty right now. You know, instead of Guitar Hero, which was 4 different developers working at the same time on 4 different games. You know, it's insane. Even Neversoft wound up doing 2 games in 1 year. They did Metallica and 5, and those were both good games. But at the same time, you're like, God, guys, I'm clawing my eyes out. And, you know, even they were like, yeah, they're like, look, we love rock, but, you know, there's an intermission sometimes. You know, can you give us a little break? So, yes, it's absolutely a risk, and yes, it's a risk that Activision's aware of, but I think you're going to see annual franchises from Activision. It's just part of their business plan. And it's how wise they can be with how they temper that and how much sort of restraint they can show. And really, honestly, like I said, for all the complaining that gamers do, like, I'm sick and tired of Guitar Hero. Well, that's why you stopped buying it. And that's not really an inconvenience to the gamer. Like, if you were being forced to buy it every year, then you would, but you have the choice to say, I don't want to support this anymore. And when you walk away, then if you know, Activision or any other publisher has overestimated your desire to stick with their franchise, they're the people that lose all the money. I brought copies of Guitar Hero Van Halen with me to give out to people. I've still got promotional copies of Guitar Hero Van Halen, you know, and I love Van Halen, so it's no problem for me. It's like, hey, you guys should all be listening to these songs, you know, because I'm an old fart and I want people to listen to Van Halen. But yeah, it's a fear, but I think that Activision has learned. And yeah, annual doesn't mean bad. I mean, Apple brings out a new iPad every year, a new iPhone every year.
Right.
I don't buy every one of them. You know, like some years I'm just like, I already have a phone.
Right.
I don't feel like buying a new toy or whatever, and especially at those prices. But, you know, just because it's there doesn't mean I'm compelled to buy it. And I think that's, you know, that is a message to send to the publishers just as much. If you're like, I don't want any more of your games, well, then don't buy them. And those games will go away as Guitar Hero proved.
Right. So, you know, if it hurts when I touch my elbow, well then stop touching.
Yeah, stop touching your elbow. You know, like this is the ultimate weapon in the industry. People forget that.
Right.
Like, you have the wallet. You are making the decisions. You don't have to do protests. You don't have to do petitions. You don't have to do blackouts. You don't have to do anything crazy like that. You just have to say no. And put it away, or just spend it on something else that looks like it's going to be more fun. And you know, that's the ultimate truth. Is you guys make the call because you guys are putting out the $60 or not putting out the $60.
Right.
And if it sells, they're going to keep making them. And if they don't sell, then they're not going to make any more. So I don't know what that is.
I don't either, but I think that's every day I'm hustling. I think that's a good time to stop the.
Well, I'm gonna get my groove on. So.
Oh, here we go. Well, Dan, thank you so much for.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about things, even the stuff that I can't talk about.
Even the things I'm not at liberty to say.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have answers to all that stuff soon. Hi, I'm Dan Amrich from oneofswords.com and the author of Critical Path: How to Review Video Games for a Living. Every day I'm hustling over to wethegamers.com.